I'm Lee from Frank Accounting, and joining me in Christchurch, I've got on the line on the video here Amanda Douglas from Wynn Williams. Amanda leads all the employment and health and safety practice for Wynn Williams. And look, thank you to all of you who are on the call, on the video. And we'll endeavour to get a recording out afterwards and some notes out afterwards as well for those who haven't been able to attend. Look, we've pulled this together pretty quickly following a conversation early this morning. Thank you to Amanda for offering to do this. We jumped at the opportunity because it's about getting the message out there to as many people as we possibly can. And, you know, as I said, it has been pulled together quickly. You'll bear with us if there's any technology issues as we go through. Look, I think we're all in this together, and that it's a hugely worrying time for everyone in New Zealand. But as business owners and managers, you're facing an additional pressure on top of what many people face. You know, you're concerned about obviously the impact on your families, your employees, your businesses. And I think that has really been heightened over the last few days as we've headed in towards this lockdown. So that we're fortunate in that we're able to work from home, some of us. At Frank, we're all working from home, and really we see ourselves as being very much on the front line. So don't hesitate to reach out at any point to any of us. And I know the team at Wynn Williams are operating on exactly the same basis. Look, so we've got 30 minutes. We've had a number of people send through some questions earlier. We'll endeavour to get through as many of those as we can. Well, Amanda will. Apologies in advance if we can't get through all of them, but look, we'll look to find another avenue to get information out to you and take on board any feedback or further questions you have. Look, many of the questions are about the wage subsidy, and we'll address that in particular. Many businesses that we've seen applied for the wage subsidy last week when it was announced on Wednesday. And since then, the impact on their business following the announcement of the lockdown, you know, they're seeing a much different impact to their business, perhaps from what they envisaged when they applied and received the wage subsidy. So we'll specifically address that and some other things too. So look, rather than take up any more time, Amanda, if you're okay if I hand over to you and you can ask and answer your questions if that's okay.
Sure. So first question is, what are the obligations to staff for whom the wage subsidy have been received? So the printed documentation does not specifically say that the subsidy has to be passed on. The documentation around, there was a separate subsidy which was for when your staff were on leave because they were sick with COVID-19 or if they were in self-isolation. That's gone a bit by the by now because all of us are being locked down, but that particular aspect did state that you had to pass that on to your staff, and that is still going to be an option at this stage if you do end up with staff who are sick, and it might be more important for those that have staff remote working. However, for the general wage subsidy, MB has stated that there is an expectation that that would be passed on, and I think that's right. That is provided to enable the employer to continue to keep the staff members in employment. So it's a bit of a money go round though, isn't it? Money goes into a bank account from which you pay wages, and I think the expectation there is that you would pass it on, and I think many of you would are intending to do that. Another question, if you have been granted a wage subsidy from the government, are you obliged to pass the subsidy to the employee if you subsequently end up suspending their employment or making them redundant within the 12 weeks covered by the subsidy? So I guess an extension of the first question. What a lot of employers are doing around suspension is that they're suspending and then paying over that subsidy. So, and that makes good sense. It's a good combination of them. What I didn't mention before is and you might have been waiting for, is if you've got a major events or pandemic clause or force majeure clause. Depending on how those are drafted, I know many of the ones that we have drafted state that there's no requirement to make any payment during this period. And then, so if there's no contractual obligation to make payment over the period under the employment agreement, and then you provide this wage subsidy, that is actually going over and above the contractual entitlements, so that can be more beneficial to the employees than what they're entitled to under the employment agreement. In some circumstances, this is another question, in some circumstances people earn less than the subsidy, e.g. an employee with 21 hours a week. What happens to the difference? Can it go into the pool to pay other people? Effectively, it is received as going into the pool. It's a payment to the employer, and they and then we've got this expectation of passing it on. There's a lot of quirky things, difficult questions around this, and when you go to apply it in practice, there can be issues. So, for example, one employer today said, well, they've got an employee who only actually works 1 day a week for them, and so they would be on the part-time payment, the $300 payment, but they have 3 jobs. And she was like, well, should this person be getting $300 from each person they work for when they don't work full-time? And so that remains an unanswered question. It may be that you could take that subsidy and pay 80% of their wages of all their normal income, and then it does effectively end up in the pool to pay other people. So it just depends on the scenario, and we're sitting down with people over the phone or video, of course, and just working through some of those practical issues that are now coming to light.